Welcome again. Happy to see you here once more. Hopefully, you're all in good shape after yesterday dinner. I was quite impressed by the amount of beer was poured yesterday night. But you all look pretty good. So apparently, you're okay with this. A nice day here today. Of course, our heart is today with our colleagues here from the UK. We've all heard what happened in London, and hopefully now it's under control, but won't be any more injuries, but still we're very sad about what happened there. We'll continue now with according to our schedules. I'm very happy to have here with us William Kilbride, the Executive Director of the Digital Preservation Coalition. I'm sure that all of you are aware of all the work they're doing with exactly the things that we are dealing here in this room, digital preservation, and William is a real thought leader in all the digital preservation world. So we're very happy to hear what he has to say, and he'll speak about change is here to stay. What does it mean, and what do we need to do about it? So William, please.
Thank you very much. There's nothing worse than when one person claps. It's like your mum's in the room. So thank you. Sorry. Hi, Mum. So thank you very much, Adi, and to all of the Ex Libris team for the invitation to speak to you today. And I'm going to set myself no more than 45 minutes. So this alarm will go off. So after the first week or two of my presentation, stop me and interrupt. So I'm very grateful to be with you on a beautiful day, and I'm aware that last night was a super meal last night, and I'm very grateful to actually. It occurs to me that I didn't see the bill for any of the beer or any of the food that arrived, so I'm extra grateful to Rosetta for that. I've got a kind of slightly challenging task today, therefore, after a conference meal, as good as last night. And, I'm going to meet that challenge head on, I hope, because what I want to talk about is standards. Good grief. 9 a.m. presentation on standards. So if anyone wants to go now, then, feel free. And I want to think a little bit about what do we understand and what's the issue with standards in the context of a fast changing community. So as usual, there'll be a bit of a presentation, but if people want to stop and ask questions halfway through, just get the conversation going, then that's very welcome. So let's start in a traditional place for all digital preservation presentations. Let's have digital preservation typically makes bleak reading. So let's start with a show of hands of anyone in the room who has ever lost a file or a document or a data system or whatever it might be that they were working on and was important to them at the time. Okay, so I'm in the right room, I kind of think digital preservation is a little like, maybe a little like Alcoholics Anonymous. We've all been there, and we're all supporting each other through the other sides of these issues. So digital preservation typically makes some bleak reading, and it's a game that we can all play. And of course, it's a game that not just for our community, it's a game that indeed everyone can play. And we've become very used to the idea of obsolescence, of organizational change, of software no longer functioning, of all the issues associated with digital preservation, whether it's bit rot or unmanaged encryption or copyright issues and so forth. We kind of assume those exist in the community and in society, and we should be thinking, I think, of ways in which perhaps we should be thinking of how to make some of these issues of obsolescence themselves obsolete. Now let's work through this problem. We start always with a sense of digital preservation as a challenge, as a risk, as a problem to be addressed. And I want to try and rephrase the problem and try and maybe raise our eyes a little bit away from the day-to-day work and remember where we are and why we're doing it. So, I keep pressing the wrong button here, that's not very clever. So what's the problem? Okay, the problem in a sense, if you start the question in a different place, you end up with a different problem. That's what I'm going to say. The digital materials, whether it's documents or files or databases or research data or whatever it might be, that has some value. And I'm using that sense of value in the very broadest way possible. So it could be commercial, it could be financial value, but it could be about, testament and witness to people's lives. It could be about some aspect of making cultural heritage available. It could be about standing on the shoulders of giants, standing on the digits of giants in the context of research and progress. They create opportunities. These digital materials, these digital systems create opportunities for them, things that we couldn't do otherwise. By and large, these are things that you could in principle do, but the scale and the complexity and the sophistication blows that completely out the water. We can do things in the real world that we couldn't otherwise do. But access to those digital materials depends on a configuration of software and hardware and people, and software and hardware and people change. Now, sometimes they change dramatically and suddenly, and sometimes they change slowly and incrementally over time. And sometimes you notice immediately that something's not working, and sometimes things just take a while to suddenly become apparent that they're no longer useful to us. So software and hardware and people change, and we know that that's going to occur. Pause for a moment and say that change is not a bug. Change is not a flaw in the system. We'll come back to this several times during the presentation, because there are times when it seems to me that we do sort of think, well, the change is the problem. No, embrace the change and we will be in a better position. Let's pursue this thought, however, for now, to say that if there are changes, then there are constantly emerging barriers to use. There's constantly emerging barriers, newly emerging barriers to the reuse of data. And they're barriers to value, and they're barriers to impact. So in a strange kind of way, what I'm telling you is, and this thought has to be worked out completely before you tweet it, data loss is not a problem. Data loss is not a problem. Not in itself a problem. The problem is the loss, the unmanaged loss of the opportunities and the values with which we have identified those digital materials as a gateway to achieving. And that's why we're here today. When we talk about preserving data, we are actually talking directly or indirectly about preserving opportunities, about things we can do in the real world, whatever those opportunities, whatever those real world values might be. Digital preservation should, it's about healthier, wealthier, smarter, safer, more creative and more transparent communities and individuals. And in that context, it's not about maintaining data sets so much as about finding cures for illnesses. It's about providing access to future generations of witness of our times in which we live. It's about sharing cultural resources which could be digitized on a one-off basis. It's about progressing research science. Digital preservation comes with tights and a cape. It's here for the greater good. And we spend our time worrying about file formats and authenticity and metadata and storage, and we should well do that. But actually, we're doing that in order that we can achieve these real-world outcomes, and we have to keep those in mind. So that's my opening kind of gambit. That's why I am interested, at least, in digital preservation. It's not for the sake of the bits. It's for the sake of what we can do with the bits. That's what really matters. And here's the sort of argument worked out for us. I mean, typically in a digital preservation conference, look at the pages of iPres or PASIG. Most digital preservation conferences and discussion points revolve around those matters there, around formats, metadata, around storage solutions, around authenticity, around a range of different materials which pertain to the actual maintenance of the digital resources. So we've been very good at that topic, and we work on that topic with a great deal of energy and a great deal of enthusiasm. I think we've also become better at talking about value. We have become better at talking about why we should be looking after this stuff in the first place. So I'm thinking here in particular of some work by Neil Beagrie and John Houghton on the value of research data, for example, who show the return on investment to the UK economy from services like the Economic and Social Data Service, the Archaeology Data Service, the British Atmospheric Data Centre. These are long-term digital archives which are feeding back real value into the British economy. And man alive, do we need things feeding back value into the British economy right now. So we've become better at talking and pitching the values and benefits of digital preservation. And if you're interested, I'm a kind of fan of an accountancy model called the triple bottom line. And I can say more about that later if you're interested. But can we move up the stack? And that's really where I'm going to go with the rest of this presentation. What about this change issue? What can we do? How do we respond? What is the conditions in which we can make sense of the causes and impact of change, the causes and impact of change upon the community, and the causes and impact of change in the context of technology? And that's kind of where I want to take us for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. So, there's part of me here who's beginning to ask really perhaps silly but incredibly large questions. What is the nature of change in society and technology, and what might we do? What might we do about change, and where does it come from? It's a bit of a significant topic, you know. It does occur to me that as a digital preservation community, the digital preservation community really came of age, I suppose, in the early 2000s, 2002 was the OAIS standard, 2005, 2004 I think was premise. There's a whole bunch of materials really coming on stream in the early 2000s. That's to say, digital preservation came of age just as that long economic supercycle, which was so long and so super that economists told us that they had got rid of boom and bust economics, we were assuming that that was the historic norm. And of course, it didn't quite turn out that way. We could try a different question here about change. We could say, if we can't deal with the nature of change, let's just fix everything. Perhaps we could say, Windows 90, let's just fix everything in Windows 95 and leave it there. And if we can find the right environment in which we can keep all these things alive, then it'll be fine. And of course, I was reminded last night that, so you know how every so often North Korea sends one of those kind of rockets into the South China Sea and everyone's kind of worried about it. I was reminded last night that the British nuclear fleet it runs on Windows 95. Go and Google Windows for submarines. It's a thing. And maybe we should therefore be investing quite a lot of effort and money on getting everything back to Windows 95. But it's not a realistic option, is it? I'm being kind of whimsical for the sake of the argument. Maybe we could ask a simpler question. Maybe this is one we could address. What are the implications of change for us? What's the implications of change within the digital preservation community? And what's the implication of that for the tools which we deploy and how we then go about using and developing them? So you'll be grateful, I guess, to know that it's the latter of those three options that I'm going to take us on for the next few minutes. And I'm going to try that from the perspective, first of all, of people, then in relation to technology, then through standards to trust and back to people. Okay? So there's going to be a bit of a drift through this presentation that's going to start with people and end with people, with technology and standards in between. So let's start thinking about people. So just a little graphic to get you going. In 2002, the Digital Preservation Coalition published the Digital Preservation Handbook. Has anyone come across the Digital Preservation Handbook before? So hopefully all of you have at some point or some form. And it was published in 2002 with two authors, Neil Beagrie and Maggie Jones. last year, about this time last year, we launched the second edition. It took us 15 years to do a second edition. That's a long time, and a lot of change in digital preservation over that time. But I think the really striking part of the change is this photograph, which represents the authors who could show up for the launch event. So we went from 2 authors to 35 authors in that space of time. Okay? We went from 2 experts who were unable to encompass the full range of digital preservation as a theme to having to draw on an international college of people from all around the world with all manner of specialisms to provide that authentic advice. Over that 15 years, that community has grown and blossomed and become incredibly specialised in a range of different ways. The community has grown. The number of people involved in this has grown. In 2002, I might as well have stood in front of you and set my hair on fire as present any solutions to digital preservation, since they were so few. And I would have struggled to do it in a room this size, I guess, internationally. I was reminding Steve, I remember first meeting Steve Knight. I remember first meeting you at the Cedars Conference in York. That must have been, what, 2002, something like that. That was my first international digital preservation conference, probably my first digital preservation conference ever. And it was probably about 50 or 100 people, you know. And that's how the community has changed and transformed. So some statistics from me, just to back up. This is my fact, by the way. This is the only fact you're really going to get throughout the presentation. 2009, when I joined the DPC, we had 33 members. Yesterday, that became 67 members, so it's doubled in that space of time. We run a thing called the Digital Preservation Awards, and for many years we offered a Digital Preservation Award every 2 years. In 2016, we offered 6 Digital Preservation Awards. In fact, there was a 7th. If you look closely, we gave a special commendation to a team in Sydney. When I joined the DPC, we had 2 staff, and now there are 6. Of us. It's a tiny organisation, but I like to put on my CV that we have tripled the head count of the company over that duration. Now, I don't know about Rosetta. I should have checked this over dinner last night, but I'm guessing that the same drift within the context of Rosetta has gone from X number of users to, you know, X plus Y number of users in that same space of time. So the sheer number of people in the room, the sheer number of people thinking about digital preservation is on an upward trend, and I don't see any evidence that that trend is going to stop at all. And I know that we run this little roadshow event called Getting Started in Digital Preservation. And I could run that in every town, in every village, in every parish hall in the UK on every single day and never quite meet the demand that we face there. But not only is the community growing, my sense is it's also becoming more diverse. Okay? So not only are we more numerous, but our needs and the organisations that we work for and the implied skill sets that we bring are becoming also more diverse. It used to be the case that digital preservation was uniquely a concern for large memory institutions, for big libraries or big archives. I don't think that's the case anymore. In fact, I know it's not the case because I can look again at that membership of the DPC and see some very small and some very unlikely looking organisations in there, whether it's the Duke of Westminster looking after his estates, because they're members of the coalition, or the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, who regulate the decommissioning of nuclear facilities. They're not a memory institution, but man alive, have they got records management problems that stretch into millennia. So they've got a kind of an interest in long-term preservation. Our needs are more, as a community, we're more diverse, and we have more data. Okay, that's a kind of truism. Let's not forget the 3 axes of data growth. There's a simple axis of growth, and we're reminded of, is it the digital universe? Well, you can pick your own report here. The Digital Universe report tells us there'll be 44 times more data in 2020 than there was in 2009, but we all, I hope, can share. Let's have a show of hands. People in the room whose volumes of data has gone up since 2009. Mostly that's true. Also, the data we have is more complicated. The data, I'm thinking here in a very simple term, later this week there's going to be lots of activity around web archiving, for example. There's a conference in London, IIPC I think is in town. I'm thinking of a website in 2002 and a website in 2017. You know, they kind of look the same, but really the underlying technologies have changed a great deal. Now in 2002 I was still knocking out some really rather shabby looking HTML 4.1. And I couldn't even begin to engage with the sorts of content management systems at a coding level that are available now. So the data sets, I'm using that as an example to indicate the data sets that we're dealing with in this context become more complicated through time. All of that leads me to a suggestion that when it comes to preservation, there are also, therefore, more use cases and increasingly more and more complicated regulation. There's more regulation by the simple fact of our growing diversity. So you bring these different sectors in, you bring in more aspects of regulation, but actually there is also, genuinely speaking, more regulation. We're about a year now from the introduction of the generalized data protection regulations in Europe. And they're going to transform, they are designed as a game changer in the regulation and retention of data. And all of this is kind of good news and bad news for Ex Libris, because it tells me, if I may, you're in the right market. It's a rapidly growing market, but also with all of these new people and all of these new requirements, it's probably also increasingly demanding to meet all of these requirements simultaneously. So as a community, as we're growing, so we're also in the best and worst sense, we're making more and more work for ADDIE, for Ex Libris, for those